Casey, ready? Okay, that's great. Good evening and welcome to the Monday, November 8th, 2021 regular meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from the executive session and I would invite those who are present and would like to join us for the pledge to please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so the first item we have on our agenda here is public comment. I don't know if there's anybody who would like to come up to speak. I don't know if either of you would like to. It's fine if you don't. Come on up. Absolutely. We did get a little bit of a heads up, but I would love to hear you explain it. Right over there so they can pick you up on the mic.
Hello everyone, my name is
Have a seat.
and I'm a student at Hopkins High School in my freshman year. I love being outside, being with my friends, hanging out, and currently I'm serving my term as freshman class president, which has been a great experience so far. I'm a Boy Scout, obviously, representing Troop 4 here in town. I'm here working on my communications merit badge, which is a requirement that you need to get for Eagle, and you're supposed to like motivate scouts to learn how to use like social skills and speaking skills to like better communicate later in like the future in your career, like in the world. So that's mainly what I'm doing here. I'll just take notes on like today's topics and discussions, and if there's anything I need to say, I guess I'll say it. But most likely I'll just be like kind of off to the side, just being quiet and listening in. But thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. Welcome.
Okay.
All right, so any recognitions that people have that wanted to share?
Oh, I actually do.
Go right ahead.
Just a couple of people. Linda Henderson, who has worked in the district in various roles over the last 27 years, retired on Friday.
Oh,
And
I did
so-
not know that.
Yes,
Wow.
yes, she did. And so I just want to wish her well in her retirement and just acknowledge all of the hard work that she's put into the Hopkinton Public Schools for nearly 3 decades.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Well done, Linda.
I'll just chime in that I had no idea she retired, but Linda and I worked together on the website subcommittee, and we've interacted in a few different places. She's just I can't believe we're gonna get by without her. She has so much knowledge and skill when it comes to student data and all of our applications that we use. So best wishes to Linda, but we're gonna miss her.
Yes. And my second one is to Simone Carta and Sean McAuliffe, who have been working very closely with the schools last Friday, and this will be in my superintendent's report as well, but they did boosters for the adults in the district, and then Thursday of this week they are doing first vaccines for our children who are 5 to 11, and they are working with the 6 school nurses as well. So thank you to them. It's been a beautiful partnership.
That's great. Yeah, we're indebted to them.
All right, so that moves us into reports, and you are up first with student council.
Awesome. Hi, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Jessie Ainelli. I'm a senior at Hopkinton High School. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's going on at school these days. For student council specifically, we've been really focused on Spirit Week, which is not this week but the next week. I've been excited planning new ideas for that and how we can increase engagement for those days, and also planning an outdoor pep rally for November 19th before the girls' football game, which everyone is really excited for. For the musical, I know everyone's been dying to hear about that. That's going to be happening this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I believe, and it's kind of a mix of a bunch of different songs from many different musicals. I know there's some from Mamma Mia, High School Musical, and Hairspray, which are all personal favorites of mine, so I'm looking forward to that. And I know that all of the kids have been working really hard, and Valerie herself too, to prepare for this, and are really eager to get back on the stage after being restrained for so long. For the music department in general, Ryan couldn't be here tonight, but I know he talked to Mr. Hayes about what they're doing, and one thing that he talked about a lot was the pep band at football games, which we've been able to have this year again, which I know in the student section we've really been loving that too, so it's been nice to see our friends playing over there, and they're also looking forward to the new lights in the auditorium and voice their appreciation to the school committee for that as well. Playoffs have begun for our athletic teams, and that's definitely been really exciting. We've been seeing a big fan section at those games as well. For volleyball, their first playoff game was last Friday, and we had the student section out on the side back out again, and we haven't seen that for like a couple of years, so that was really exciting, watching everyone walk in and be so surprised to see that. So that was nice. And then obviously we had our first week of mask optional policy, which is definitely a big deal at the school. Mr. Bishop sent out a survey to get some results from that, so I can share those as well. Overall, a lot of people said they had a positive experience, which is really great and what we wanted to hear. Some of the pros that they listed were being able to see people's faces again, which is a little thing, but it really adds up, so that was nice. And I was glad to see a lot of students said that they didn't feel pressure to take it off or keep it on and were able to just make their own decision and not feel any judgment for that. Some of the negative responses voiced concerns about cold season and spreading other diseases besides coronavirus. And also some students did have anxiety surrounding whether they wanted to keep it off or on based on what their classmates were doing and if they would face judgment for that. 79% of the responses said that they thought we should keep the mask optional policy after Thanksgiving break, and 21% thought that it should be required again after Thanksgiving. The next question that was asked was if this mask optional change had an effect on their learning this week. And a lot of people said it really didn't have an effect. They didn't feel one way or another. But the people who did say that it did have an impact, most of it was positive impacts. For example, classes were more vocal and social and friendly, and people were just talking more, which is definitely something that I've noticed in my classes. And overall better communication and easier to focus, so you're not worried about the mask slipping under your nose or whatnot. But one negative that was voiced was people were less comfortable working in groups or working with peers, especially if people were unmasked. Just it was kind of uneasy. But that was the only negative that was responded. For the other questions, if you want to go to the next slide, most of the students felt comfortable even when people were unmasked around them, which I thought was good. Only around 10% of students felt uncomfortable if someone next to them wasn't wearing a mask, either a teacher or a student. There wasn't really a difference between those two groups, so I was glad to see that as well. Some of my main takeaways, if you want to go to the next one, sorry. I thought a good portion of, I was surprised to see how many people kept their masks on, and I think this was good because it kind of relates to my last point. You couldn't really tell who was wearing a mask and for what reasons, which I thought was definitely a pro because that was something I was worried about. I didn't want anyone to be targeted regardless of their reasons of wearing a mask. I know many students and people that I've talked to made a class-by-class decision and put it on for teachers who they either knew had anxiety about COVID with young kids at home or underlying health concerns. So I thought that was really great to hear kids talking about that and really thinking critically about their decisions and how they would affect other people. So that really enlightened me. And I thought it was definitely a benefit that teachers had a list of who was approved to take their masks off, because I did have some teachers tell a few students in my class, especially that first Monday, oh, you're not on the list, and you couldn't really tell if it was because they weren't vaccinated or they just hadn't filled out the form, which I know a lot of kids just hadn't gotten around to. So it was good to see that and to know that your teachers had your back and you weren't going to be exposed to someone who could potentially spread the disease. Although in the response to the form, some students did voice concerns over teachers lacking enforcement of the mask for students that maybe they just assumed or they knew to be unvaccinated or hadn't filled out the form. So that's something that they definitely wanted to emphasize if we're going forward with mask optional. And then the next half of this is about flex block, which is the new schedule change we've had this year. If you want to go to those, yeah. So the majority of students that responded to this survey were very in favor of the flex block and really thought that it was a great use of time and was very beneficial, and they used their time efficiently, which was good. This meant either for classwork or retaking tests or quizzes, but also just for a much needed break during the school day, which I definitely agree with. Mr. Bishop asked if we were to keep flex block in the school next year, how often they would like it, and the overwhelming majority of students, 96.2 as you can see, would like to keep it at its frequency now or increase the amount of days we have it, with a lot of students saying they wanted it 5 days a week. So I don't know if that's possible, but they definitely like the flex block. And just in case you guys were curious, this next one talks about what aspect of flex block students use most. If you want to go to the next slide, there's a list. So students could select as many options as they wanted, and I know a lot of people just said everything, but 93% of the students use FlexBlock for catching up on work, and a lot of students also find it as a break from the day, as I said before. So those are kind of how students are using their time in this period, if you're curious about that. And I believe that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer.
So I love all of your updates. It's great to have your perspective and appreciate the data from the survey.
Of course.
I'm really glad to hear your perspective on the mask or no mask, because I know that that was a big concern that a lot of parents had and that we had discussed as well. So the fact that nobody's judging a student for whether or not they want to wear a mask is wonderful to hear. So thank you so much for doing all the work to get us this information.
Of course.
I have a question on the flex block. What were some of the other responses other than catching up and break? What were some of the other valid choices people could have chosen?
A lot of it is making up tests and quizzes. I know a lot of my classes, I've already used that multiple times just as an avenue. If you work after school or have sports, it is kind of hard to get extra help or make up tests and quizzes. So that was a big response. And then some of the others was working with peers on projects. I haven't personally used that, but I think that would definitely be useful in school. And just extra help was the other thing.
Okay. Those are kind of incidents that might not come up quite as frequently, so it makes
Yeah.
sense that having a break and catching up would be more frequent response. But
for
all
sure.
of them are probably used.
I know a lot of seniors also used it for college applications. That's not on here, but I know a lot of us told ourselves, okay, we're going to work on our supplementals every Tuesday and Thursday. So that was also helpful.
Good, thank you.
It's really great for us to have this report from the front line. We've been eager to hear it for a long time. And can you just remind everybody how long the flex block is for those who are listening and don't know?
Yeah. So it's every Tuesday and Thursday. I think it's 40 minutes. And basically you stay in the class that you're in that period and you can work on whatever you want. Although sometimes you'll have like a guidance seminar. I know we have senior guidance seminars about college applications, which are actually pretty helpful. So unless that's required of you, you just get to use the time how you want and decide what you need to work on.
That's great. Thank you, Jess.
Of course.
So that moves us into the next report, the MCAS report. I don't know, are you ready with your slides?
We'll be ready momentarily.
That's okay.
Must go all the way around the world a few times and then come back
back.
here.
Maybe.
Do you want us to jump
can
down to
talk,
liaison reports?
Sure,
And-
that would be
'cause that'll be a
great.
quick-
Yeah,
quick
thank you.
fill of
Make me
it.
notice it.
Does anybody have a liaison report that they would like to go ahead?
I do. Just a quick update on the calendar subcommittee. As you know, there is a calendar subcommittee, and just for the community's benefit, the school committee launched a calendar subcommittee this year, which was formed to review calendar changes that were actually implemented 2 years ago by a previous calendar subcommittee. And at the time, it was agreed that 2 years later we would check in. I believe Meg was our liaison at the time, so correct me if I misspeak. But the intent is to look at what changes were made and make sure they're effectively representing the needs of the community and the students. And among the changes that were made or maintained by the first calendar subcommittee was acknowledging Diwali as a day off, which we all experienced last week, and also retaining Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Good Friday in their holidays. So the calendar subcommittee is comprised of administrators, teachers, students, and parents. And Dr. Kavanaugh and Ms. Parson are both on the calendar subcommittee, so feel free to jump in as well. And we have two active working committees right now. One has looked at what other districts are doing with calendars, and one has been focused on creating a survey for the community to see how the current calendar is working for folks. And so that survey is going to go out in the middle of this month, and it's going to teachers, high school students, parents, and community members. And so from the survey data, the review of comparable districts, and other inputs, contractual obligations, and so forth, we will come back to the committee and make a recommendation based on our findings about whether to make any changes or consider changes for the calendar. Did I miss anything?
Like so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quickie. The Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan Subcommittee met, and our administration has revised it with intense, I don't know, it reads very clinically to me, but it's good, right? All of the kind of unnecessary fluff is out of it. It's very much a policy. It reads very much like a policy at this point, which is okay. And we're still working on it. We're working on developing the district climate team,
We are.
which we need to have in place soon. And then we'll bring it before school committee January 13th.
Yes.
Yep.
We sent it off to legal counsel today for review.
Right. And is there anything else you want to add about the work?
No, I think the two outliers were district climate team and legal counsel.
Okay, and the climate team is coming together.
It is, so we're thinking about putting something out to people to see if they would like to be part of a district climate team.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you just review what the district climate team is? Is that a requirement? Or is that something that came out of your committee?
It's very interesting because when we did this work a couple of years ago, and then I think even, prior to that, there are references everywhere to a district climate team. For as long as I've been in Hopkinton, there has never been one in existence. So I would imagine that when they first put this bullying prevention and intervention plan into place, they must have thought they would create one, or maybe they did, and then it just sort of waned. So that's something that's kind of important to us. The other thing that I thought about with this climate team is that we've recently sent out a survey, a social emotional survey to faculty and staff. Carla Burley, our new director, has sent that out. And it might be interesting to see if we could have a district climate team and then weave the bullying piece, the sort of roles and responsibilities that they would have in terms of bullying, but have the district climate team be something even greater than just a connection to the bullying plan.
I have another liaison report.
Great.
Briefly. So the Elementary School Building Committee 2 met on the 27th of October. And the main agenda was reviewing enrollment data and projections, including projections from our demographer as well as the MSBA. And the other half of the agenda was a tour of Elmwood School, which is the subject of the ESBC2. And the committee was shown many of the different operational and educational constraints that exist at Elmwood School. We talked about intertwining a campus study as part of the eventual feasibility study for Elmwood School, and discussed having a press release go out. So that would be coming out shortly, I believe, if it hasn't already.
I think it went out last Friday.
Okay, yeah. So just want to draw the community's attention to the fact that we're working on a solution for Elmwood School and also a broader campus study. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, just to clarify?
Yeah.
The campus study committee, I think, was sort of commissioned by the school committee, right? To look as a sort of a separate activity and a separate capital project. Does any committee action have to get involved if we sort of morph it into something that's happening in tandem with the ESBC?
I don't know. I guess that's a question for the superintendent or finance director.
Yeah, it would seem to me that that study would not be limited to the ESBC2. We may want, another group of people working sort of in tandem with some members of ESBC2, some members of maybe the school committee. And I think obviously bringing the community along is really important with that study.
Yeah, it was more, the discussion we had at the meeting on the 27th was more that the two would happen at the same time, rather than whose jurisdiction they were under. Yeah, good question though, hadn't thought of that, thanks.
Okay, great. And I see that The
Yes, the magic happened.
magic happened. Spinning circle stuff.
Well, thank you for your patience. So people have been waiting a long time for this MCAS presentation since we had an entire year off of MCAS. So this is the long-awaited results of MCAS 2021. So one thing that I wanted to start with was just kind of the unusual nature of how MCAS was rolled out last year. And these were all of the DESE regulations that we were obligated to follow. And, you know, I think DESE did the best that they could. There was a lot of division and a lot of discussion about whether or not an MCAS should happen last year. Obviously, the answer was that it would. But I do think that DESE did the best that they could to help provide data for us in a way that made sense. So the test was reduced in time from grades 3 through 8. Instead of a 2-session assessment, students took a 1-session assessment. What makes the data, in some cases, a little difficult for us to work with is that some students took what was historically session 1, other students took what was historically session 2. So there were some discrepancies just in terms of how it was administered in comparison to some of the years prior, or really all of the years prior. The other kind of interesting thing that happened during MCAS last year was that they did allow students to take the MCAS at home if you were a remote learner. So we had gone through a lot of discussion and deliberation about what would we do with our remote learners. Would they come in? Would they not come in? And DESE said, no, we have a way that they can access the test remotely. And so I think that was actually a huge relief to a number of our students and families and frankly our schools, given where we were and the situation and everyone's feelings and anxiety last spring. So, you know, again, DESE gives us that last bullet point with the triangle and the exclamation there, telling us that MCAS, and we say this every year, it's not a standalone, it's not a be-all, end-all. It's one piece of information that obviously is an important piece of information because it's based on the standards that we teach in our classrooms, but it's one of many pieces of information that we use. So a couple of the adjustments that were also made at the high school level, if you are a student in the class of 2022, you are not required to participate in the ELA and mathematics assessment, but some students did choose to do so because it has a connection to some of the state school scholarships. So some students did elect to take it. And they were also not required to participate in the science test. So in all of those areas for the class of 2022, students received what we refer to as their competency determination through passing a class that met the requirements of the state. So a math class, an English class, and a science class were sufficient. Again, students in the class of 2023, they had already participated in the ELA in the math, and they were not required to participate in the science test as well. And again, those students will have their competency based on a class that they're taking. The high school also did not allow for an at-home administration, so the high school did take measures in order to bring students in who are learning at home and have the MCAS administered at school. So this is some information that we've heard frequently from the commissioner and from DESE as a whole, that, you know, as I just referred to, there were a lot of unusual ways in which MCAS was administered. So, you know, there's a lot of comparison, there's a lot of talk of how did this town do, how did that town do, and they're really just kind of cautioning us that when we look at these scores, they're not even just compared to different towns, but really when you compare us to us, you know, what do we look like from one year to the next? This year was unusual. So we probably don't need a lot of reminders that last year we had hybrid and remote learning. The MCAS, you know, DESE continued to kind of move the target date of when we were administering MCAS, and we had a lot of anxious administrators and teachers and frankly probably students wondering, will it happen, when will it happen, what will it look like? Again, some kids in school and some at home, and the abbreviated version of grades 3 through 8 were all the disparities that kind of contributed to the whole of what MCAS was. So, you know, what we're doing is we're really using the scores with what we would say interest to help us really look at our students and who they were last spring, who they are right now, and then what does this look like in terms of what we're going to do. And really the majority of this presentation is focusing on how we're going to be looking at our students right now. All of the scoring categories remain consistent with what we're used to seeing. And this is just kind of a general overview, just so you can see where we were in terms of our students who were either exceeding or meeting expectations, and where we were compared to the state. And I think, in this particular community, we always enjoy, for very, very good reasons, in terms of, our students, who they are as learners, and the instruction in Hopkinton. We always see scores that are well above the state average, and that did not change. You will see that in English, we, for the majority of the grade levels, 3/4 of our students or more were exceeding or meeting. And there'll be another slide that you'll see that shows a year-by-year comparison. So math data, same thing, percentage of our students exceeding and meeting expectations. And I will admit that, those scores in the 60s, while clearly higher than the state, math compared to ELA statewide, the scores did take a little bit of a dip. So we were proportionally, I think probably where a number of other districts were as well. And again, I'll talk a little bit later about what we're doing for that moving forward. Science, same thing. Again, science is only administered in grades 5 and 8. And 79% of our students exceeding and meeting at grade 5, and 73% at grade 8. And again, the note in the bottom was simply what I referred to earlier, that the sophomores last year were not required to take the science. That's why there are no scores there. So, I think we worried so much about, oh my God, how much will they lose, and how dramatic is the dip going to be? And interestingly, looking at the year 2018, the percentage of students exceeding and meeting expectations, moving from right to left up to 2021, you can see that, yes, in some cases we did go down a little bit. It wasn't as dramatic as I think we may have worried. And, again, I really attribute that to the model that was selected in Hopkinton, the amazing efforts of our educators, our administrators, our students, and everyone who just did everything that they could. Our technology department really getting us up and running and where we needed to be for students. So again, in some cases, the scores weren't exactly where they had been, but it certainly wasn't anything that you could say, oh my God, they've lost years of learning. Again, in math, as I said earlier, a little bit more of a dip, but again, that was fairly proportionate to where the state was. Interestingly, in science, we happened to do a little bit better in 2021 than we had in 2019. And I think if I were to probably attribute a cause to that, I would probably say that has to do with the new science standards and the fact that we're in a pretty comfortable place with the new standards, and the science MCAS has been shifting over the past couple of years to match the standards that are now being taught in our classrooms. So that was kind of an interesting shift. So what are we doing right now? How are we using this information? So the student-specific data is where teachers are right now. They're really digging into the scores. They're working with their building administrators, and they're working by grade levels and teams to make sure that teachers have the MCAS information. They're looking at a couple of different types of information. They're looking at students, lists of students that they had last year, so they can see the performance of the students who actually sat before them in the classroom. They're also looking at students who they have right now. And they're furthermore, and what I think is probably incredibly important right now, is looking at the reports that DESE gives us called the item analysis, where we can really look at what were the standards, what were the concepts, what were the patterns, where did our students perform really well, were there areas in patterns where globally our students did not perform as well as we would have hoped, and those become our areas of what DESE calls acceleration. Those are the areas that we're really making sure that we're getting to in our curriculum, and at just the right time. So we're not putting a halt on things and saying, oh my God, we didn't get to polygons last year. We're finding the right time and the right place within the curriculum to make sure that students get access to the information that they need. The other thing that DESE does is they select one open response question that we receive the written response from every one of our students who took the MCAS, and Our buildings are able to go through those released questions. They're able to go through their actual student responses and see, again, what were the patterns? How did our students fare? What's happening with our student? In most cases, those are, or really in all cases, those are student responses to text that they have read. So we're spending some time looking at those and seeing how that connects to our current work in the area of reading and writing. So some of the other things that we're doing, I've divided this information into two areas. One is in staffing and one is really our professional work. So some of the staffing that we've been able to put together this year to support. At the Elmwood School, we have an ELA tutor who's been hired to assist with targeted reading and writing skills. We have a number of teachers who we're actually sending to Lesley University to work on some of the LLI, which is one of the reading intervention programs that we use and is research-based. And so we're trying to build capacity, not just of someone who's a reading specialist, but of classroom teachers who see students in the classroom each day. At Hopkins School, we're looking at one of our paraprofessionals and reallocating some of that person's time, again, to focus on targeted reading and writing skills. So that won't be a person who's only helping out in, lunchroom or recess or things like that, or kind of bopping through classes. And I shouldn't say it quite that way, but that position will be more than just a general support position. There'll be targeted goals that will be set in working with both the building principal and with our ELA director. I'm also currently working with the Hopkins School to plan some grant-funded tutoring for outside of school hours as well. One of the challenges with in-school tutoring is that, we always come back to that question of when. When do we do it? What do they miss? So we're looking at ways that we can make it work for our 4th and 5th graders. At the middle school, again, we also have a grant-funded ELA tutor to assist with targeted reading and writing skills. And I probably should have mentioned that we're using our scores and we're using the data that we have to determine the criteria for which students will be invited into this type of tutoring. At the high school, we have the addition of tutoring centers for ELA, math, and science. ELA is a full-time English teacher who's supporting that work, and math and science are more part-time and drop-in models. Jesse talked about Flex Block, and that's an opportunity for kids to go and get some of that support as well. So our elementary math coach, we've had one for one year, I guess. We've had a part-time math coach. And last year, with your budget that you passed, we were able to increase that position to a 1.0. And immediately, I'm seeing the difference with the work that person is doing. She's going through the data. She's meeting with teachers in their PLCs. She's helping teachers make, really exceptional use of their time. In terms of how we focus on some of the foundational skills and ensure that our students are coming up with the skills that they need. The K-6 ELA director is spending a little more time this year working at the middle school, specifically with our grade 6 teachers, thinking about the transition from grade 5 to 6, which is always a big one, and kind of just looking globally at where we are with reading and writing. And the middle school is just kind of a different world than a much more confined elementary model. So she's really beginning some work at the middle school level to help out there and ensure that we're getting our kids going with what they need. And the addition of the 1.0 SEL director. And the reason why I put that there is, I guess, really twofold. One, we know that when kids aren't available for learning isn't happening. So we're trying to arm our buildings with some more strategies to support our students. And the second thing that's really been helpful about the SEL director that's been hired, Carla Burley, is her philosophy that SEL and academics are to be intertwined, and they work hand in hand. So she's been out in the buildings and trying to share that message with all of our staff. In terms of professional growth, some of the additional measures that we're taking, again, with MCAS being one source of data, we're looking at in education or maybe in other fields too, we talk about triangulating and looking at data, multiple data points. So we're looking at our STAR data, we're looking at the MCAS data, we're looking at the balance assessment system that we're using in our elementary classrooms for English. We're looking at a number of different math assessments as well. So we're really making sure, and on top of all that, I just talked with a teacher today who talked about also authentic classroom observation and data. And so just a reminder that it's not always a number that we see on a test, it's what teachers are really seeing before them. We are adding some training for our staff in some specialized reading programs. I've mentioned one of them already. We have consultants who are continuing to work with the district to really think about our inclusive practices and make sure that the models that we're using and the systems really match our learners. And that's work that's, a good portion of that work is done under the purview of Dr. Zaleski, and she's doing a really nice job with our buildings with that. The new math assessment approach, we've taken some year-end tests and we've moved them into the beginning of the year so our teachers can really see what skills were my students supposed to have mastered by the end of the previous grade and where are they in comparison this fall. We've also taken some new math assessments at the very younger grades K through 2 and a little bit into grade 3, which is more of an interview style math assessment where teachers can really sit with kids one-on-one and begin to understand what is their thinking. Why are they giving these answers? What is their mathematical thinking? And that's really helping them to frame their instruction. We're continuing to look at writing, adding additional writing assessments in several times during the course of the year so we can see our students' progress with how they are addressing text and expressing themselves in written language based on the standards. And again, math coach, ELA director, I think there's really, it's actually really gratifying to see the concerted effort in all of our buildings with our administrators, our SMLs, our CTLs, our directors, really looking at information and looking at individual students and saying, where are they, what are we going to do? And then middle and high school, some of these things are very similar. Again, focusing on multiple sources of data. We're starting to talk about conversations, and I think we do a great job of this transitional planning in Hopkinton with so many transitions that our kids make. But there's really, there's never enough of that. We never have enough opportunities to really talk and dig into who are our students. And sometimes we have those conversations proactively, but sometimes we also have them reactively, like, we have a group of kids coming up and we're worried and now it's April or May and what are we going to do? We're really working on bridging that communication because we've all really come to realize that some of the I hate to use the word deficit, but let's face it, that we had a deficit of instruction. And some of the situations that our students are finding themselves in aren't going to be rectified by this June, no matter how hard everyone's working and how much we'd like to think that that's the reality. We have work to do, and communication between the buildings is really critical for that. Again, looking at the standards and offering explicit practice for those where we know we've had some holes. The middle school, with the direction of Mr. Keller and Mr. Ghosh, have begun their data team. We've talked as a district about how are we going to start really focusing on data. And middle school had a nice full day introduction to that on the last professional day that seemed to be received very positively with a lot of scores and a lot of discussion and a lot of really rich conversation about how we use data with our middle school students. Again, adjusting curriculum in a way that works for the status of where our students are now. With some of the help of actually our resident literacy expert, Dr. Kavanaugh, we are introducing what's referred to as disciplinary literacy in science, English, and history at the secondary level at the high school. And that's so far been received in a very positive way by our teachers, which is really a way of helping our students think about how do I read and write as a historian or a social scientist in history classes and as a science in the science classes, and really getting our kids back to reading text and putting paper to pencil or pencil to paper, which is, it's been an area where we just haven't had enough opportunity for lots of different reasons. The other thing that we're doing is where we can, we are implementing the use of some online supplemental tools with our students. We're getting our middle school and some of our high schools set up right now with a program called Achieve 3000, and that's an online opportunity for kids to access articles at their own readability level. So no matter what the topic is, and if you're reading at a 7th grade level, you can read it at that level, and if you're reading at a high school level, you can read it at that level, and if you need it at a 3rd grade level, you can access it that way as well. And that program has come to us as part of a grant, again, through DESE as part of the whole response to COVID and some of the supports that our students need. So we had a number of English teachers and special education teachers at the middle school who said they were interested in signing on to this, and I think it will be a nice addition to their repertoire. We've talked about the SEL director in terms of just some of the other things that are happening. The .6 social worker that Bethany Hadley will be joining us on November 15th. And again, we know when kids either don't come to school or are anxious about coming to school, or their families are in some kind of a crisis that is beyond kind of the scope of what we're traditionally able to do in a school. We're really hoping that the social worker position can provide us with some supports and areas of need for some of our students and their families. And then our work with access, equity, and inclusion, again, continues along some of the same themes that I've actually heard you talk about as a committee and some of our goals in the district improvement plan. Just, how are we making sure that the curriculum that we're offering, the instructional practices that we're using are supportive of all of our students. DESE just released the windows for this year. So, I think all last year we would hear when we would have our meetings with the commissioner, people would say, will there be an MCAS next year? Will we have the MCAS next year? So, yes, we now know that there will be an MCAS this year. We have the dates, and our building administrators have begun the work of going through and selecting the dates for their own schools and what that will look like, and trying to not go too hard on our tech team by everybody testing on the same day. We try to be thoughtful about that. And that's where we are. So that was a whirlwind. I'm sorry, it was a lot of information, but you've waited 2 years for it. So.
That's great.
So yeah, thank you so much. I feel like I would have questions, but I feel like I need to parse a lot. And I was wondering, do you mind sending us the slideshow so that we can spend some time looking through it? Because then questions might pop up. Because it was a lot, and it was a lot of really interesting stuff.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you have anything you can share with us about how subpopulations performed on the MCAS, whether it's by gender or by socioeconomic need, the high needs, or because I think for me, whenever I apologize, I haven't had a chance to look at the DESE data, which I often do, but it's often very informative to see which pockets maybe struggled in the pandemic more than others. So do you have any narrative in that?
I can tell you that what you would see in our data probably wouldn't surprise you in terms of high needs students. So if you're talking about economically disadvantaged students, Latinx students, historically marginalized populations, and in some cases we have very small cohorts, which makes it a little bit difficult to go through our data when you're only looking at 15 kids. What are their presenting needs? But I think I can send that information to you, but I think that it would look pretty similar to what you would expect, that some of the historically marginalized groups did not fare as well as we would have hoped, which is why some of that work on equity and access is really important.
And do we look by gender?
We do, and I can't tell you that off the top of my head.
I'm always curious. I'm always watching, which genders are struggling with which topics, and I think, our boys in ELA tend to have had some historic issues, so I haven't really looked, but I'll take a look.
Yeah, I'll send it to you so you can see it in depth.
I applaud all of the labor that you have undertaken, and it's always wonderful to hear about these external critiques and assessments of our students. It's amazing how far ahead we are compared to state level scores.
Yeah.
So, wow, the difference between Hopkinton and the rest of the state is astonishing. But with specialized reading instruction, and you knew this was coming, why is there only specialized training for the elementary school and leveled literacy intervention in Wilson when neither are effective with kids with specific learning disabilities in reading, who are 15% of the population? Do we have any Orton Gillingham certified instructors? Do we have any Wilson certified instructors, or do we only have ones with partial training? This 15%, they have been struggling for years. Ever since I've been in this district, they're still struggling. They will continue to struggle until we invest in hiring Orton Gillingham certified teachers. Let me explain the difference. Wilson is not an individualized program. It works for small groups of kids, but kids with specific learning disabilities in reading need an individualized approach to help them tackle the tough spots that they really struggle with that you can't do in a group. It's also recursive, unlike Wilson. It returns to those troubles areas once you've passed through the different levels to make sure they've been corrected. So when I saw that, my heart sank, because we have been working so hard as a special needs community to provide this 15% of the population with the skills they need to survive. I mean, my child is 6th grade average intelligence and is 4 years behind in his reading. And I love his specialists and I love the school, and you guys are doing so much for these kids in every other way to bolster them, but we are failing these kids when it comes to literacy. Those 15% are really struggling, and I would love in the next few years to see some substantive change, and not just the return to leveled literacy intervention, where there is no scientific evidence, research-based evidence that it's effective with those kids. You know, and it just breaks my heart, because I feel like all of our words have been overlooked.
I will say that we have trained lots of people in Orton Gillingham and Wilson, and when I say that, I truly mean certified.
You mean they are fully certified in
Fully
Orton Gillingham?
certified in OG
So
and in
how many
Wilson.
OG certified instructors do we have in the elementary schools?
So we could certainly get you that
Yeah, I don't know
information
that.
from the elementary, but I think we had this conversation going back 5 years,
They've
truly.
been happening for a long time.
Yes, and we
you know?
did at that point in time invest in sending a lot of our educators off to OG and to Wilson to ensure that they would be fully certified. I think one of the things that we know is that Wilson is not a single year program.
No.
It's a multi-year program, and so if kids start, say for example at Elmwood or at Hopkins, you know, sometimes that means they'll get all the way to middle school and still be getting Wilson. And that's
Wilson
okay,
is not
that's what they
effective
should
for
be doing.
elementary school students. If you call Wilson and ask them, they will tell you so. So why are we still using it with those young kids? Why aren't we using Orton Gillingham? What,
And we
I
are.
just don't
We are.
understand. But why are we confusing by using a little Orton Gillingham here and a lot of Wilson here?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would want, you know, like Vanessa or Ann Carver to answer those questions for you, but I do know that we start with like Linda Mood Bell Lips for our youngest kids, then we go to Orton Gillingham, then we look at Wilson. We truly do.
I think we need a better program for those kids. 15% who are really so far behind. It's just not, that's not equitable. They're not being given equal access to the curriculum.
One thing we are doing this year is we started this work last year with some consultants from Lesley University, and we actually have a follow-up meeting with them tomorrow, in fact. And part of the work that we have started to engage them in is really helping us to match just right programs to our learners. And so the work that they did with us last year was to get a sense. It was the very beginning stages of what is our district, what are we using, who are our learners, where are our gaps? Because I agree with you that we do have situations where we have lots of things, and not everyone knows which is the right thing and which is the right approach and the right antidote for whatever the situation is that the student is presenting with. So that is more work that is upcoming for us, in addition to some of the other work that we're doing with Donna Simone and some of the other consultants. But those consultants from Lesley specifically are working with Karen Zaleski and Deb Moriarty, our director of ELA, and myself and the building principals to resolve, you know, what do we have, who needs what, and where do we need more training.
And I do hope there's under real consideration creating language-based classrooms for each year. That's another thing that we've kind of been hoping would happen, and it hasn't yet. Because you need a consistent program for these kids. You can't just have them learning OG in this workshop for ELA and then have that not a part of the rest of their curriculum. So, please, I am 95% of praise and glory. let's do something real and substantive to help them. And not patchwork.
Agreed.
Question, I did have a question. The MCAS that's being administered this spring, will it be back to being the 2 sessions for each, the
Yes.
math and the ELA?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments before we move on?
No, I
specific
want to thank
topics?
Meg for bringing that up. Very well articulated. Thank you.
Well, it's
And yep.
out of my mouth every year.
And I also would be interested in the kind of breakdown that Amanda asked for as well.
I'll send it to all of you.
Thanks, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so if it's okay, I would like to see if Mr. Cormier would like to come up and take the item regarding the MIAA masks out of order, because I know that you have a lot of tournaments and other things going on this week, so if you want to come up. I don't-
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, of course.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
So, we invited you here tonight, Mr. Cormier, because when we first began with the lifting of the mask mandate, we said, okay, so we'll just follow the MIAA rules. We'll have kids masked in chorus, masked on buses because it's federally mandated. And we would follow all of those rules that sort of trumped our own. And then what we've come to learn is that there's sort of a movement at MIAA to allow people to make decisions at the local level. But the problem, I think, is that there's sort of a disconnect between what MIAA is saying and what DESE is saying, because DESE is telling us that we can lift a mask mandate if we have greater than 80% of our students, faculty, staff, custodial staff, everybody in the building vaccinated. And in some way, shape, or form, we need to be able to collect that data. And when you submit your your request for a waiver to DESE, they ask you about that information. But when we're bringing other people into our schools to either, participate in athletics in contests against our players, or to come and be visitors and watch, be fans for the other team, we know nothing about their vaccine status and sort of where they are. Mm-hmm. And there are other issues around being able to, maybe for lack of a better word, sort of police this, right? How would we know who was and who wasn't? That's not within sort of the school's purview. That's not the kind of work that we do. So we're really looking for, something I think that the school committee can make a decision about in terms of masking or not masking at athletic events.
Sure. I'll give you as much as I can. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I think everyone in here knows, we're one of the few schools that I guess can even have this conversation. In that sense, as we're one of the few that is mask optional during the day. And this has come up right now as we have one policy during the day, and then particularly with volleyball, which is what is our ongoing sport that is indoors right now. And then this will again be an issue for really all of our winter sports outside of skiing. There's multiple phases here or facets here, as Dr. Kavanaugh mentioned. We have our students, many of whom do not have to wear a mask during the day, but then we are having them wear a mask either to compete or to watch the contest. But then we have visitors, we have officials, we have lots of other personnel that are present as well. So it is a little bit trickier than the day-to-day, running of the school. The MIAA initially sent out some communication August 26th, which was right after DESE sent out their mandate. I'm sure everyone remembers, obviously DESE was originally saying it was up to schools, then they changed that, and the MIA originally said it was up to schools, and then they changed that. Dr. Kavanaugh was on an email chain with myself, sort of a little bit of a frustrating email chain in which I was looking for very clear guidance from the MIA, and in a sense they gave it to me in the email, where they noted that it is up to local discretion. However, there has been nothing formally communicated to the membership of the MIA schools, which is over 300 schools, other than this email. And I pointed that out in my response back, that this is nice to email me after I asked, but nothing has actually formally been communicated to schools. So if I had not asked this question, I don't know that I would even have an answer to it. So there's a little bit of frustration there as well. I do know the Sports Medicine Committee was meeting today. We have not received any information on what was discussed or what was decided at that meeting. So hopefully within a few days we will receive a little bit more communication from the MIAA with some sort of guidance towards not only the remainder of the fall season, but the winter season as well. Also, as Dr. Kavanaugh mentioned, you know, at the only thing I would say is athletic contests are a little different, right? In a lot of different ways. Our student body, for example, if you take them, they're all sitting together. Whether we have them masked or not, they're going to leave. They're going to get into one another's cars. They're going to go hang out at each other's houses. I mean, our volleyball team is wearing a mask. I'm sure they're actually at someone's house right now having a lovely pasta dinner where no one has a mask on, right? These are just the realities of you know, what we can control and what we can't control. The other spectators, typically, they're sitting with families that they generally sort of socialize with and hang out with to begin with, and now they're doing it with a mask on. Whereas the moment they leave, they're probably not. So it's very, very tricky on following the rules, keeping everyone safe, making people feel comfortable, and then also just sort of the logistics of it all. Even the mask mandate for our schools, for a classroom teacher, I can look at my list and say, okay, well, these 5 students didn't submit their paperwork, so they have to wear a mask. I have no idea. I'll be the first, like, I mean, Jesse knows, comes to the game. I have no idea, and there's no way I can keep track of every single person's vaccination status. Even though we have that information, it'd be very weird for me to be looking at that as the students walk into the student section. So from a management standpoint, it is almost like we either have to decide to trust people, right? And ask people if they're not vaccinated that you please wear a mask, or we just have to stick with what we're doing, which is have everyone masked. We could be in a situation where, let's say hypothetically, we were willing to allow people to be mask optional at athletic contests. For instance, we're playing Burlington tomorrow night. Burlington may say that's great, but our girls still need to wear a mask because that's their prerogative to do that. Our student athletes and our spectators would certainly have to follow any mandate that is in another school and another venue. So, you know, if our volleyball team was fortunate enough to advance beyond these next 2 rounds, we would be moving to a neutral site. And most likely they would be required to wear masks. And that could remain in place throughout the winter season as well. So there's just a lot of moving parts. So we could certainly make a decision for what, or you all, not me, you can make a decision on what we'd like to see at our own Hopkinton events. But we really can't control what we do when we go to away schools. That's really, we have to follow their rules. And I think our students all know that, and our coaches know that, and everyone, spectators are you know, very well aware of that, and I don't think it's going to be an issue. But that's sort of the situation that we find ourselves in, where we sort of have one policy during the school day and sort of another policy after the school day, but they are different.
Do you want to say something?
No, I'm waiting for you to wrap it up or tell us
So
what the issue is.
you know,
Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I do want to say something.
Go ahead.
If you're just going to do that. I'm not sure I'm not sure I understand what the problem is. I'm sorry. So we knew that we'd be asking them to follow MIAA rules. They can choose to follow the more strict one, that is the rules, or the email, which is indecipherable. That we didn't choose to address MIAA rules in our
So, and
policy.
that's why I was asked to put
Yeah.
this back on the agenda, is
Yeah.
because it's falling back to the local level, which,
It doesn't have to. We could just say follow the MIAA rules like we did. Or we could say, how many people show up at these events? Is it over 200?
Well over.
Yeah, yeah. Because what I was thinking is, I mean, in events where there's less than a couple hundred, you're still above the 80%, you know? But the difference between 95% of our population and 80% is around 200, right? If you, or more, at least 200, right?
Well, I think part of the issue is,
So you could have.
does the
two-
policy during the school day
Yeah.
apply to extracurricular activities? And I don't know
I
that
don't
that's
think so.
been clearly addressed.
Sorry, can you just clarify, where's the MIA right now? Because I
Yes,
thought,
that's unclear.
because
They
this,
don't wanna
so,
say.
I thought that the indoor athletics for the fall, it's got all the parameters I could put around it. I thought indoor athletics for the fall, because of MIAA, were supposed to mask. And it sounds like through unofficial communication channels, they're backing away from that, but nothing official has come out, right?
So in essence, their policy in August was based on the DESI policy, which was local control once you hit that 80%. And that's really what they're still saying, is that then if you fall into that category, so it's mass, just like DESI says it has to be mass unless you hit a certain percentage, and then it's now up to local control.
Oh, okay.
So how do
The
you?
problem is they haven't recommunicated anything. That email on August 26th noted that we would hear on October 1st. We have not heard anything, which is why I reached out to them. I actually reached out to them in advance, knowing that this might become an issue. Got even less of a clear answer at that point. And now, once it came to fruition, I really wanted to know. I've also spoken with other athletic directors who are in a similar situation, and none of us really know how best to navigate, because we're trying to balance what we're not sure of with the MIAA, but also not knowing exactly, from my perspective, how to implement the policy for the school day to what we do after the school day.
What's,
I was gonna say, it appears, and this is from Friday, when I was looking at the MIAA website and looking through their minutes, what they're publicly putting out there is that they're still requiring masks indoors. Is that, I haven't checked today, but is that?
I mean, it depends what you mean by publicly,
Well, if
because
you
I've
look on
now
their
heard,
website, what
I've
it
heard from
says.
two different of their assistant executive directors that it is up to local decision, that the MIAA, not shockingly necessarily, does not want to take a stance, and they would like to be sort of hands-off. And then we no longer have those EEA guidelines that we had last year to guide really many of these decisions. There are no EEA guidelines. So for instance, youth sports.
Yep.
If you were to play volleyball, basketball, hockey, and you pick your indoor sport, not part of a school, they are not wearing masks right now. So, and that's because there is no EEA guidelines. So we're operating now under a different set of guidelines within the interscholastic setting and within schools.
so last year, not that I want to go back there, but like I know, in the fall when there were MIA and EEA guidelines, the referees were actually, in many cases, like in soccer, they were calling COVID fouls and things you couldn't do according to the guidelines that were given to them by the MIAA. Is there no parallel instruction for this year? The referees can just do whatever. And I guess my question is, in terms of, like, I went to the volleyball game on Friday, I have to say, it was a great game, but a great set of games. But, I thought the Hopkinton fans and students were doing a great job. We had a lot of visitors, and I think it was unclear probably to the visitors, because there was a lot of masking and unmasking. I feel for you, it's a lot to manage, but I'm wondering in terms of parity for the competition, if we play, if you say Burlington or whomever, if they have to mask, is the MIA seeing that as a condition that can be unequal and still have the same kind of level playing field?
And I agree, and I think that's what we're hoping to have some clarity. You may have noticed last year in some collegiate games, there was one team wearing masks and one team that did not necessarily have to wear a mask. That did happen from time to time. We never had to worry about that last year. It was universal.
Yeah.
We could find ourselves in those situations this year, depending on if the MIA gives any clear guidance. I've had conversations with Coach Grabmeyer, our volleyball coach, and we've kind of talked that if our opponent needed to wear masks, we'd probably just wear masks, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just
Seems
because
like
that's the
sense.
fair thing to do.
Right.
But there's a difference between doing that because it's the fair thing to do versus whether or not we're mandated to do it and so forth. So there's still a lot
clear
of
guidance. We can empathize with Mr. Cormier for sure, right? Because we've all wanted clear guidance over the past year and a half. And this I wish that people in different state leadership positions would make clear guidance too. But given that they don't, what is the best case that I'd like to ask through you? What is the best case that Mr. Cormier would see coming from? Or is he looking for a school committee to vote something, or what would help Mr. Cormier? And would it help, or would it just cloud things even further? You know?
For me personally, I think where the MIA is throwing it to local decision, that is, I guess, what I'm looking for is a decisions. Whereas, Amanda, you referenced the EA guidelines, and I truly do not want to go back to those. But in some ways, it was very clear cut. Right. You could do very little, but you knew what it was that you could do. And again, I do not want to go back there, but it made for some sort of simplicity in the sense of what was allowed and what was not, whereas we're very much living in a gray area right now. And certainly we're going to be able to function at tomorrow's volleyball match. There are much more pressing issues at play. I've been in touch with the Burlington athletic director, and I've told him as of right now to expect that everyone should be wearing a mask tomorrow. And then I'd certainly let him know if that was to change. But one of the things that Dr. Kavanaugh did talk about is, because I also want to make people feel comfortable. Although it's a choice to come to these games, no one's required to come. Again, it is different than school where you're required to come to school. It is a choice to play sports. It's a choice to come attend these games. But you still want people to feel comfortable coming to watch these games. So, there could be a situation where we still decide, even if you decide that we don't have to have everyone wearing masks, where I would probably still set up a part of the bleachers. If you're familiar with our athletic center, we have 2 sections of bleachers. We can make one that we require everyone. If you sit in this section, you still need to wear a mask, just to make people feel comfortable. There's different ways that we can do it. But it's hard right now because we are living in sort of just this gray area.
So I think he's saying he'd like us to make a vote on it. I mean,
I'm really uncomfortable voting on something this fuzzy right now. And specifically, I mean, if we're talking percentages, right? We know that even if we have a visitor in the building during the day, we're still above 90% coverage. Mm-hmm. If we have an entire team of people from a school that is 40% vaccinated, the coverage in that room goes down significantly, right? And we are no longer hitting 80%. So that means that the
in the room.
The rule. Well, if we're doing volleyball, right?
Yeah.
And we have, we don't know, first of all, we don't know the vaccination rates for the away team, or the away visitors. We may have some idea of vaccination rates for the team coming. Volleyball's weird because there aren't that many people. Let's say something with more people. But the point is, the percentage rates go down, and we go below 80. And at that point, even Desi would say that we shouldn't be unmasking. So it's a...
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, but I'm saying if you have less than 80% of people in a space that are vaccinated, now the risks go up a ton. So trying to come up with the requirements for sports in this meeting, in this moment, it just seems way too complex to actually make any kind of determination or vote of any kind.
Because it seems to me you're asking for guidance on a number of issues, not just whether or not our athletes can unmask, but we're talking about hundreds of visitors coming in too, over whom we have no control, we have no knowledge of their vaccination rate. So I agree with Leah. There's no way that we would know it was over 80%. So I don't know. I'm not comfortable.
I was just going to add that I don't know there's any requirement 80% per room. I don't think that's the DESI requirement. It's 80% in your school community. So if we add a couple hundred people to the school community who are unvaccinated, we could do the math, right, and find what is our total school community, 1,400 people, And if today we have a 95% vaccination rate of that, or 1,300, whatever it is, then how many wholly unvaccinated could we add to our school community and still be above the 80%? And we could limit attendance to that. It's one way to do it. Another, what I would hope you would do if you were to pursue this is not to get everyone's vaccination record or check vaccination record at the door. I'd rather just have
Yeah, I don't want to
even
do
for
that.
our school, I'd rather just have a sign that says unvaccinated, please wear a mask. That's all. And that's all you can do. And that's what's being done all over the state and any other place other than a school. So, makes sense to me. I just wouldn't want to hold ourselves to, percentages per room. I don't think that's the requirement.
So I would agree that there's no way for us to be able to assess the percentage.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way. And so I do have concerns because if you've ever been to, for example, the state volleyball championship, which is likely where our girls are going, you can have better than 2,000 people in that room. And I mean, we've got 1,200 kids in our student body, and families will go, and they'll bring siblings, and they'll bring grandparents, and that number of people gets really big really fast. And I guess my concern is that there can be people who have no symptoms but be COVID positive in that room, or people who have the potential to spread the flu or colds and viruses. And the moment kids start showing those symptoms, they need to be out of school. And then once they start testing negative, or if kids do get COVID, they're out of school again for another 10 days. I just think it's because it's indoors and because there are that many people with masks off yelling for a very, very long period of time, we could be opening ourselves up for kids losing learning in school. That's my concern.
The only point of clarification I'd make is if we make it to that level, that would be out of our control.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
That would
Right,
no
I was
longer
gonna say.
be under our
Sure.
purview.
Yeah, if there was a big tournament with 2,000 people, that tournament organization would control whether masks are required or not. I
That
think
would
we're
be the
talking about
MIAA,
masks in our
yes.
school.
I mean,
And
at this
home
point in
games.
time,
Home
we
games
still
is
have
what
to
you're
remember,
talking
we're
about.
getting
Visitors.
a lot of people at those
Yeah.
games.
Yeah, it was
Like, would you say we're
packed.
getting 1,000?
Yeah.
The other night we have actually the ticket sales, so I think we sold close to 300 tickets.
Okay.
Amanda, did you want to? You looked like you were going to say something a minute ago.
I have so many thoughts.
Okay.
I didn't
But
want to
it's
jump
just-
in until you had.
It's so complex. No, I just, is there a separate decision regarding sort of TVL play for the winter in a set of teams that you are in close contact with on a regular basis? Is that potentially a different decision than postseason play or out of league play?
So we do have we meet every other week as athletic directors, and then we meet less regularly where we have all 12 principals and the 12 athletic directors. And we actually have a principal and athletic director meeting coming up. I think it's November 19th or 20th. And I'm sure that's going to be a real topic of conversation. Truly, I'm not sure if there are other TVL teams that are close. I believe there's at least one other or two others that are contemplating a similar policy to what we have, which again could impact their athletes after school.
Can I ask for clarification? I know broadly, does our policy, we didn't get the superintendent update first, so we're kind of
Yep.
without the benefit of that. But did we mention in the way it's implemented, have we mentioned visitors must still wear a mask? Or is that not part of our,
That's what we have been
Implementation.
adhering to, and
Yeah.
that's also something we agreed to with the Hopkinton Teachers Association.
yeah.
And that was something Dr. Kavanaugh did address because of the MOU with the HTA. And again, it's just where does athletics fall into that? I'm very much used to being in sort of a gray area within schools. But it is a little more complicated in this sense because what is a visitor? Is the opposing team visitors or just the spectators visitors? We also have officials that are technically visitors. It is a little bit more complicated.
It is the visitor clause that we have during the school day or after the school day? I thought it was just during the school
Right.
day, so.
There's
yeah.
some mention of some after school stuff as well.
I think it's a similar thing with robotics, and if we do MICA this year, I mean, like anytime you're bringing in external people for competitions with visitors and judge, I mean, it's not just athletics, but
Right.
you are leading the way.
So, I want to go back just a question. You had mentioned the sports medicine committee meeting earlier today. Do you expect that that will provide a little more clarity to where, I mean, I know it's hard to be predictive in that way, but I guess last week I had kind of hoped that there would be a little bit more that they could offer us, and clearly they don't.
I would love to say yes, but I very much get the sense that they're taking a hands-off approach and letting, unfortunately, school committees have to grapple with this decision, and they're just letting it be. Whereas last year we had those very specific prescribed policies and guidelines to follow, it seems very less likely that we're headed in that direction. You know, to your point, Amanda, before you mentioned some of those COVID fouls and those rules. No sport has any modification whatsoever. Whereas last year, every sport had certain modifications, spacing requirements on the sideline. You know, you couldn't do a throw-in in soccer, just, but then a week later we played basketball. So it was a little confusing at times, but we did have those very specific guidelines for better or for worse, whereas we do not have any modifications in any of the sports. The only modification that exists is that the competitors in indoor sports have to wear a mask.
And does the referee check them in, like at the beginning, like they check shin guards, they check, masks? No. So the referees are not part of this equation? Okay.
They do wear them, but no.
So,
I still don't know what exactly we're being asked. I mean, did the MIAA say that the school committee needs to vote, or did they say this is up to you? This is up to your local level?
It's up to the local
Yeah.
level.
So, it's up to you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's a difficult situation, right? I wish should we write a letter to the MIAA and tell them we need them to do their job? I mean,
no, I don't know. I mean,
I'm not-
sure, go right ahead. I'm
I've
not
never
sure
been a
that's gonna
fan of the
shift.
local control. I see it as an abdicating of responsibility by the relevant authority. But if they're telling us we can do what we want, I would say unmask at the games. But, I don't know. It seems a little...
The players.
The players could unmask at the games, but I think you're going to run into just as many problems doing that, Rich, because I think that other teams might have objections and, I don't know.
What happens at the musical
important is
on
this?
Friday and Saturday? Do all visitors have to wear a mask to attend the musical?
The plan is that the visitors will be wearing masks, but the students who are in the musical have the opportunity for a rapid antigen test prior to the show on Friday, and that they'll be able to unmask to sing.
But visitors have to wear a mask.
Visitors are wearing masks.
I much rather have the conversations that Meg was having about teaching and learning models,
Yeah.
than we just spent another 20 minutes on masks,
Well, I mean,
And
all I can say is all the guidance I can find on the MIA website is from August.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they haven't officially released anything. Until they officially release something that says they're abdicating responsibility to the local level officially, I don't know that we can vote on anything anyways, right? Like, we have to go by whatever their official
I don't have any
guidance is.
documents here. I don't have the
You
email
have to pull
trail
it up
even.
from the MIAA.
Yeah. We have the
But
email trail.
it's not the email trail, it's if you pull up the
I
MIAA.
thought they just kind of mirrored Desi's advice.
No,
generally.
they have their own,
COVID
now I had it
passport.
pulled up, and it says like their recent, there's a list of key decisions that they've made, and it lists the August 26th thing, and then there's nothing else above that that would rescind that officially.
Exactly.
So
So, and that said, what, that if a district is above 80%, then,
it doesn't say anything
No,
about
it
that.
doesn't say
It
that.
said
Oh, okay.
it said that indoors, everybody had to wear masks.
yeah.
And it was released in conjunction with DESI. So it was a,
It was, but it doesn't say that really, I don't think, does it?
yeah, it does.
So, Rich, can I ask a clarification question? So when, say, the volleyball team is practicing indoor, are they wearing a mask now or not?
We're letting them use, when there's no one else there,
Yeah.
we're letting them abide by our school policy.
Okay.
Awesome.
go.
And that
good.
seems
There
like
you
That's
that's
the way
right.
to do things.
But I would think too, if you're having other teams come in who are masked, it's just more decorous to remain masked. If you're bringing them in, because they might be not fully vaccinated, but also uncomfortable. So I wouldn't want to impose.
I'm
by
certainly fine
unmasking.
imposing.
Yeah.
I guess that's what we have a school policy, and I guess the question is how far does it apply, or to what level does it apply in athletics? I guess that's the guidance I'm looking for. If we need to continue asking people to wear masks at our games, then that's what we'll do. It is challenging, I think, for the students who have one policy during the day, and then they come to the games and there's a different policy at those games. But to their credit, they've done a great job with it. But that's really, to Joe's point, what am I looking for? I guess, does the school policy apply to extracurricular activities and at our events in Hopkinton, not outside of Hopkinton, in Hopkinton, or does it not?
I think that where we are is that visitors have to mask. I mean, I believe that policy-wise, I think that's where the school committee has last left things.
And
Well,
I think
we
we
prob-
agreed to MIAA guidelines.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was one of our discussions, and we said we would agree to the MIAA guidelines, whatever they said.
I'd have to go back and look at Dr. Kavanaugh's slide on which I based my motion, but I
No,
think
it's
it
a-
referenced MIAA.
It's-
Rich is asking what was our guidance,
Well, we have the policy, and then we have, how we discuss impact bargaining.
Sorry, no, I'm talking about, we first have to know what we voted on October 21st in order for Rich to know whether it applies to him or not. Did we exclude MIAA? Were we silent on MIAA? Or did we say specifically, if for sports, please follow MIAA? I think we might have said that, and that would just kind of clarify it. Therefore, unless we were to make another vote now, that would be what Rich follows.
I think another dilemma that
Do
you
you have
have
it?
is that this extends to the 22nd of
I'm not
November.
looking for a dilemma, I'm
and then
just
it's
looking
up.
for a slide,
Yeah.
if anyone has that
Yeah.
slide from the 21st. But yeah, right, we don't know how long this is gonna last either. Again, we haven't had the superintendent's update yet.
Yeah, I'd really like to have that as well, to know how everything's working before we start expanding the reach of everything.
I'm hearing some people are uncomfortable making this decision tonight. Is that accurate? I know some people are comfortable making the decision, but that would be, do we feel comfortable that that's where we are as a majority, or do we want to have a motion stating that that's where we are?
Well, we only have a week and a half more of the trial, so.
Maybe,
Right.
we don't know, we
We-
haven't had the superintendent.
Yeah, well, we.
Well,
have to vote
but we'd have to
anyway.
vote it
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
It sunsets on its own whether we
Yeah.
vote
Good
Good
against it or not.
discussion to
So,
have.
I think I will make a motion. Here I'm gonna go. I'm gonna make a motion just because I think that the clarity is needed, and I feel for you, and I don't even know how you would enforce it, but here goes my motion anyway. I mean, I think that for the duration of our trial, which is the motion I'd be willing to make,
There
I
you go.
think that for any activity that is happening in extracurriculars, athletics, musical, robotics, whatever it is, I think that we need to have visitors to our school masking. So I guess my motion is, I would make a motion, I would like any visitor to our school, just for the first motion, any visitor to our school to be asked to mask.
Can I just ask a question though? Because I think that would actually put me in a worse position. So,
Yeah.
the way I interpret that motion is that our student body could be sitting there unmasked. The rest of the spectators would have to be masked.
Right.
Our opposing team would have to be masked, and our team would possibly be unmasked. That would be, for me personally, awful.
And Hopkinton parents would have to be masked.
Yeah.
Parents would do that.
So I think that would honestly make things more complicated, because it's, why don't they have a mask on? Why can they not wear it? It would be, honestly, I think, far more difficult to even enforce that.
yep.
There's,
Fair point.
there-
I bet you my motion won't get a second though.
But that's part of the reason I was saying it's too complicated
Yeah.
to decide tonight.
well,
It's just, there's so many different ways to look at this problem, and this is the first time it's been really put in
Yeah,
front of
yeah.
me.
Well, let me say, the reason I'd make that motion, I think that the MIA documented policy should hold because we have not seen anything contrary, even though you have, we haven't. So I would assume that indoor athletes would be masked. But I think that it is in the spirit of what we are agreeing to with this trial that visitors mask. So I would be, if we do nothing tonight, and visitors come to the game tomorrow, and it's, I don't know what the condition would be, because we will have done nothing. Like, I would be a little bit uncomfortable not asking the visitors to mask, because I think that's what we agreed to.
So, since it hasn't been seconded, we're not really discussing it too much, but since Amanda's trying to help you, I think you were trying to help. Right? But that didn't help.
This is what
Again,
help looks
what would help you? What motion would help you?
Again, I'm not looking
Yeah.
for an answer. I guess my ultimate question is whether or not we are going mask optional for extracurricular activities or not. And from what you guys are saying, you sound uncomfortable doing that without knowing the vaccination status of the people coming in. Or maybe not all of you, but that's kind of the general sense. That's really it. Is we do fall in a different time frame. We are after school, and this is kind of short-lived for us right now, at least until the winter season.
But it could come.
At most, we would have one more volleyball match on Friday. If we're fortunate enough to advance tomorrow night, we would host again, most likely Friday night, and then beyond that, we would go to neutral sites if we continued to advance. So then the next time that this would come into play would be for the winter season.
Right, so if I could make a recommendation, it might make sense to do universal masking at all athletic events until the onset of the winter season, which would give you as a school committee the opportunity to think hard about what you really want to do in terms of voting, because what we're hearing from Rich is that there's only really a few volleyball games left that this would impact.
Correct.
One.
Well,
I
we're
would
hoping
like
more
to
than one.
Actually, two, if we
We're
win
hoping for two.
tomorrow night.
Yeah,
I would
okay.
like to do nothing right now.
Yeah.
Because Rich is subject to the MIA rules. He can continue to discuss with them what those are. And that's I think what we did on the 21st. We intended this to be for the school day, and we said that the MIA rules would be in effect for sports.
Okay, so can we just
I'm not going to
procedurally?
make a motion or
No,
anything.
but I want to deal with the motion that's already on the floor.
It hasn't been seconded.
I know, and I just want to confirm that there's no second for that so that we can let that go. Okay. So I hear what you're saying. I don't know if anybody else is inclined to make a motion or if we would,
Does our current vote have people who come to school at like 3:00 wear a mask? If somebody walks in the building at 3:00 to go to a place where students are gathered, are we currently having them mask or not mask?
An adult or a kid?
both.
Either. From outside.
I'll tell you that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jess, you probably have the best knowledge of this, but in my experience in the high school, if someone comes in from the outside as a visitor, that person is masked. Like they seem to know that that's the protocol. Like if you're a parent, you come into the building masked.
I mean, it was a very mixed bag in the stands on Friday night
Yeah.
of Hopkinton and outside visitors. And I don't know how you would police that. I can't even imagine. It's not a job it's not your job to do that. So I would never ask you to do that. That's not, you have a million things going on in an athletic competition.
Yeah, we could talk about enforcement versus a sign too. It's not necessary that if you're trying to limit, if you're trying to make sure unvaccinated people are masked, there's multiple ways to do it, right? It doesn't mean you have to check their vaccination status. You could just have a sign, like every other entity in the state. You go, there's a sign on the door. Vaccinated.
Do we
please
have a
mask.
sign on the door? Outside
We
the
do
house?
have we do have signs that are masks are
Okay.
required to enter. We have hand sanitizer,
For
and
unvaccinated.
we actually have a box of masks
Yeah.
there as well for anyone that shows up without them.
Okay, so the sign stayed up even after the vote.
For the gym,
Okay.
Rich, is tomorrow night's game home or away?
it is home. 6 o'clock. Come on out.
So you need to know for tomorrow night what the spectators and the players are going to do. 'cause
Well,
we
we're
have a
operating right
visiting
now that everyone would wear a mask.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
Okay.
that's the
think that's-
communication that's gone to
Just
Burlington.
that's- right.
I think that's what the students are anticipating. and certainly our parents who have been masked all year long. So.
I just want to add one thing. I know I've been really overwhelmed by this, but I thank you for bringing it to us.
Yeah.
Because if you are getting emails, then we might get an official thing at some point. And I think having a heads up that this is something we need to be thinking about is extremely useful for us. So.
I do think it's something worth considering down as we continue to evolve and our policies continue to evolve as we kind of move, hopefully, further away from all of this. You know, because it is something that does come up at our athletic contests. And I do feel for the students in particular who have sort of the different rules. But as I said, I know you were trying to help me, but that would, honestly, if the Burlington, you know, families came in, and I was like, oh no, they're fine, but you have to mask. It's just, that's not good. It would just create a very contentious environment right from the start. So, you know, as much as I would love for the students to be able to go without, I just don't think that would be a great dynamic. Especially, I don't think Burlington's going to bring a big student section, but if they did, it just would create a lot more issues than it would solve.
So maybe this is what when we kind of look at what the next steps are beyond this trial, we want to make sure that we include this as part of our conversation, I think, so that we don't leave you
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
lesson
out
learned.
hanging without specific guidance.
Is there any role for us to write a letter to DESE
Absolutely.
to ask for guidance? DESE and the MIA, is there a role that you would like us to play to help give voice or just support your voice in looking for guidance?
What if I propose that we wait and see if we hear anything from the sports medicine committee, and if they are still very wishy-washy, I would love for the school committee and Dr. Kavanaugh to, I think Dr. Kavanaugh can speak. I was very direct in stating that although you're emailing me this information, we have not received this information. And I believe I said something to the effect of you say it's leaving it up to local decision. It's very hard for local municipalities to make these decisions without this information that you're emailing me.
True.
And then I did not get a response to that email. So
Which means you were right.
Super helpful for them.
So yes, it is a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I definitely hear where you're coming from.
So, well, thank you.
All right,
Thank you
thank
for
you very
considering
much.
it, and
Yeah.
we'll just continue chugging along here.
Go
All
Hillers.
right. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Rich, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, we are going back to your report now.
Okay. Bob, do you think you could get that on the screen for me?
Plus, it's really 9:30.
All right, so thank you. This is the superintendent's report for November 8th, 2021. Just an enrollment update. What you are seeing on the screen right now are the enrollment numbers as of today. And so you can see that the increase from last year to this year is at 81 students. Obviously, we've approved 534. We have 11 pending. 136 students have left us. That gave us 409. We graduated 328. So 81 is the number where we are exactly today.
Is it okay if we shift that so that they can see? I'm just the
Yeah,
angle
I
that
can't
that's at. I think it's
Yeah, the
probably, is
angle's
that,
not like it usually is, so it's really hard to.
thank you, Bob.
Thank you, that's perfect, thank you.
Exiting 136.
It is, thank you.
And just so you can see where we were a couple of weeks ago, we were at 403 and 75 students, so we are 6 more students since the last time the school committee met. I think these two slides are important because I don't think what people realize is that incrementally you kind of have that growth over time. So when someone like Dr. Wagman or the MSBA says, you know, here's your projected enrollment for the year 21-22, that projected enrollment takes you all the way to the end of the school year. So, you know, as people in September look and say, oh, look, we're nowhere near the projected enrollment, but that's because of that incremental growth that happens
But you no longer have to convince us that our population's growing.
Correct.
And every time,
I know.
but every time you present this, I feel like you're trying to convince a skeptical audience that Hopkinton's growing. I mean, we live here and we know it's growing, and the data clearly says that. But I mean, what's more interesting is what are we doing about it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also interesting might be, how does the number exiting compare to the number exiting 2 or 3 years ago? Or the number entering compare or not to 2 or 3
Sure.
years ago? You know?
So I can certainly,
Yeah.
kind of change this presentation up, but we do enrollment all the time. I mean, it's something that we put on this agenda
Yes.
every single week, and maybe we don't
But I
really
always
need to
feel
do that as
way,
frequently.
Like she seems to be convincing us that it's growing. Like,
Oh, no.
see, I told you so.
I think we
But
all believe
but we know it is. Yeah.
I like
Yes,
the
we do.
comparison against the budget because that
Okay.
starts to tell us, like if you look at the previous one where it's 81 versus 72.
Yeah.
Okay, at some point that starts to tell us there's going to need to be a new classroom, there's going to need to be new support, our budget didn't cover the numbers that we wanted.
Right.
So that comparison I really like.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so if you intertwine that kind of commentary in there, therefore we might be looking at more investment in teachers or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
And yes, we will.
Or even just offering the enrollment update once a month instead of every meeting.
Yeah, that might be helpful. And now I think when we get into budget season, you start to see those presentations,
Yeah.
They'll
Yeah.
be a clear connection, I think. All right, I think last time you did ask that question about is MSBA planning to build a building for a great big number of kids or not? So we received this letter. What you see at the top is actually an excerpt from a letter that was sent to the district from the MSBA on October 29th. And what they are telling us is that as a result of analysis on the average base enrollment projections, the adjustment to the base projections described above, and based on the historical enrollment trends of the district, the MSBA recommends a study enrollment for the Elmwood Elementary School project as follows. So if we were to build a 2-3 school, they are looking at 785 students. Right now, Elmwood is 630-ish. If we were to build a 2-3-4 school, they're looking at 1,195, so just under 1,200 students, which is exactly sort of where the high school is right now.
But
That's a
four
very big elementary school. Yes. And I guess maybe to generalize, what we could anticipate is that graduating classes from Hopkinton High School would be up around 400 students at that point. All right, just an update on lifting the mask mandate, and I think maybe Jesse did such a nice job that I don't have to spend too much time on this tonight. Historically, you voted for this on October 21st. We took a cautious approach. We were using a 3-week trial period running from November 1st to November 22nd. Today it was very nice. Rob Curtin, the deputy commissioner, gave us a call, and we received a commendation from Desi on our implementation, and he and several other districts across the state are kind of putting that out there as a model. So that's been really very nice. And as you know, today was really only day 4 in terms of being in session because we had a couple of holidays last week.
Doing so well.
We're doing great, day 4. All right, so in terms of implementation, students were sent a Google form, and what Linda Henderson had said is that if you're using a Google form and you want people to be able to upload, we are really only accepting things being uploaded from people who are within our organization. So that's why the kids had to get the Google form. We required the students to upload 2 pieces of documentation. The first was the parental consent to share health information, saying, yes, we're happy to let the school nurse look at my child's vaccine data. And then the second one was parental consent to unmask. And we did that for several reasons. One was that, we really believed that parents needed to be able to do that because so many families have situations, and we've heard from them, where they would have been very uncomfortable with their 15-year-old just being able to take that mask off without anyone sort of overseeing it. Some of them said, I work in a situation where if my child came home COVID positive and I had to stay home from my job, it would be loss of wages for me and for my family. Or people would say, we have 3 generations in our household, or I'm very worried about my kids who are ages 5 to 11 and I don't want my child taking that mask off. we always give our parents sort of permission to make those kinds of decisions, and so that's what we did with this model as well. It also gave kids, I think, maybe Jesse, you could speak to this, like that sort of cover, so if you were a kid who really, you were also very nervous about doing this, there were other parents and other families and other kids who were in your same boat, so you didn't feel like you were the only one with your mask still on. And I think in terms of what she presented tonight, a lot of that was just about being a good citizen. When I walk into a room and I see that there are a dozen kids here with their masks on, if I want to take mine off, I might slide my desk a little further away, or I might think about the needs of my teacher and my teacher's health. And so all of those things I think have been, it's been a really nice implementation in that sense. The last thing that it did for us, and this I think was really helpful to the teachers, is they just kept saying, but how will we ever know? We can't just sort of have this free-for-all where some kids are wearing masks and some kids aren't. And when we devised the permission slip, kind of means of being able to say who could and who couldn't unmask, the teachers could then get a list of the students who are not allowed to unmask. So there may be unvaccinated kids, there may be kids who, for their own reasons, didn't want to unmask, family health, family work, all of that, they all fell into one big group. And I think, some of my colleagues statewide were saying that it's a really good model to use because now you have lists, but those lists do not single out anybody who happens to be unvaccinated. So we don't have any HIPAA violations because of that. In the first week, we had 612 students submit their documents. So on Monday morning of last week, that's how many kids could have unmasked. When I put the number in earlier today, it was at 694 students. When I looked tonight, when I arrived here, it's at 698 students. So we're just at about 700 out of the 1,200 kids. We did have a couple of families who kind of struggled to figure it out, and in those situations, Kayla Sables and a couple of the other staff at the high school, as well as Georgette Wagar in my office, were really helpful and kind of walked the parents through it in kind of a little tutorial. So I think that people who needed assistance got that. And then I really think that the transition at school has been kind of business as usual. It's almost as if you didn't notice it. Like you walked into a room, some kids had masks, some kids didn't have masks, a teacher had a mask, a teacher didn't have a mask. But everyone's just teaching and learning. It just looks like normal school. So that's where we are.
Questions?
Yeah.
Is it okay to ask questions here?
Please go ahead.
So on the Google form, I understand that Google form is limited to people in the community, right? It's a school community, is what you said, right?
That's what Linda reported,
Yep.
yes.
But aren't there other ways to collect the forms? Email attachment, for example?
Well, I think the lovely part about the Google form is that you can turn it into an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And so then those lists are already made for you. So then you can easily sort grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and just hand those lists off alphabetically too. And that's why we ask for what's your last name in one box and what's your first name in another box, so that people don't go Jane Doe, Doe Jane, and get them all mixed up,
Yeah. So it provided some convenience for the administration, but it, I think, provided some inconvenience for the students,
That may be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then were there other ways to validate vaccination? Because the whole reason you were collecting that via the Google form, or if there was another way, was to validate vaccination status and parental permission. But were there other ways to validate vaccination status? Like I thought when the health director was here October 7th, there was reference to a state database and the nurses were going to check students against the state database or something like that, or is there not a way to do that?
Sure. So yes, the school nurses can look in the state database to see if a student, so for example, we did have some students who submitted their vaccine documentation and they would have said, I received my first dose on April 19th, 2021, and then there was nothing there for a second dose. So rather than call that family and say, we don't have proof of it, they could scoot into that database and get that information to see if there really was a second dose or if there wasn't a second dose. Again, though, that would have been exceedingly labor intensive because they'd have to go in and pull each one of those kids' names, because the state doesn't say, these are all the kids from Hopkinton. They just say, these are all the vaccinated people in Massachusetts.
But there's no database administrator like on staff or somebody technical that can just pull the column and merge the columns and see how,
Well, because it's health data, it's usually our nurses who do
Yeah.
that. So I don't know if we would have been allowed to let someone else look at student health information.
Oh, nurses, I guess. Okay. And then, yeah, I thought the first communication on the Tuesday night, it came as a surprise to me. We had our meeting October 21st and made that decision to unmask or to allow mask off-ramping for that 3-week period. And I don't know, I felt like I would have wanted to have been consulted on the implementation, especially when I saw how the email was worded on that Tuesday after October 21st. Not just me, but many people who got that email found it very poorly written. It was just confusing. It looked like it was a first draft, and it confused people. Not only was the process to, here's a form that's sent to you and it's attached, it's a PDF, this is your permission form, your student is receiving a Google form, you've got to send this form but upload it through your student's account. It could have been much more clear, I think. I think that's a lesson learned, I think, for next time.
Sure, we'll
Is the
take that under
communication should be-
advisement.
The
Yeah.
second email that was sent out was much more clearly written. The one that came, it was the following, it was later that week, I guess. And it was by Saturday, I need everybody, Saturday at 3 p.m., all this has to be in. I thought that one was much better, written much more clearly, So I feel like in the future, if we have a motion, especially if we have a motion that's such a high-profile thing, and it's a little bit ambiguous in how it could be implemented, just the courtesy of a phone call, or if we need a meeting, I'd be okay. I know the time frame was short here, but maybe a phone call I would have felt better as the one making the motion. Because how it was implemented was a little different than how I imagined.
So,
There's a lot of focus on enforcement, for example, and that wasn't part of our motion. I think we could have, I'm not sure to what degree you're accountable for enforcing this, or if that's your interpretation, or if another way to enforce would be to put a sign on the door, like everywhere else we go, that says unvaccinated, please wear a mask.
so
Yeah.
I would assume that in terms of like lessons learned, if we move forward with this, it's not going to be the same level of, because we've already got this stuff on file.
Yeah, sure.
I think in terms of phone calls, I would worry about a serial conversation. I think that it would require an emergency meeting, and it wouldn't be an emergency, we'd have to post it 48 hours in advance. So that would be
Yeah.
something that
Could have been done.
it could have been, although I think as a committee, I think if we have any kind of operational constraints that we wanted to have imposed, I think the opportunity for that would have been
In making the motion.
in the beginning,
Yes.
in our discussion, if there were
Yeah.
things that were specific to it, to come to agreement then,
Yeah.
because by mass general law, by statute, the operational piece falls to the superintendent.
Right. I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that there are still students trickling in. That's good. That's promising. So I'm happy to hear that. I still worry that there could be a good portion of those remaining that haven't neither had parental permission or vaccine record submitted, that they're just for whatever reason, they have difficulty communicating within the family, and they're being, unable to take advantage of the
Yeah.
mask
Well, what's interesting is
requirement.
60% of the kids almost have submitted that documentation, and the vote here passed by 60%. So I think that you're starting to see that 60% is almost at that kind of comfortability level that's in the world right now. The other thing is, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if we do this with the middle school, we will use the same process. It's a process that I think the nurses know, the administration knows, that, we all sat together and really thought about how this was going to work. And I'll tell you that accountability does have to be something that's important. We can't simply just trust that unvaccinated people can be taking their masks off, because that's not what DESE has said to us.
I'm sorry, what did DESE say for the high school, if they didn't say that?
So the letter that we received from the department said that that vaccinated people are able to take their masks off.
Yeah.
Unvaccinated people still need to mask.
Right.
So there is a level of accountability.
Yeah, for those 20 or 30 people who were unvaccinated in the high school. Is
Sure,
what
whatever
you're
the
saying?
number
Yeah,
is, yes,
yeah,
yeah, sure.
I would also add that there are people in the community who have publicly said that they did not want their child vaccinated, not vaccinated, but did not want their child unmasked. And if that had come to,
We were aware of that when we made the motion, though.
we were, but so I think parental permission is appropriate. I think we asked for parental permission for a number of different things. And that,
Yeah, I admit I didn't include anything like that in the motion that says without
Yeah.
parental permission or anything like that, so left the door open, but we didn't have that discussion, that's all. Yeah.
so,
We're not in charge of operation,
True.
and
No,
I
no.
trust the administration who've always pulled, well, the past year and a half, pulled off many a miracle quite
Yeah.
smoothly.
Yeah.
And I mean, look where we are, we're so
Oh,
ahead
I'm
of the
grateful,
game,
yeah,
so
I'm grateful, yeah.
bravo,
especially
team.
following,
Yeah.
our MCAS was good and
I
our
am so
safety is
tired,
good.
Nancy, I barely have language in my
All right,
mouth
so we
right
should
now.
move beyond that,
Because
this
it's
is just a
really
report,
10
I know.
o'clock, and this is just miserable.
I'm
So,
sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't function for much longer.
I hear you. All right, so do you want to?
Just two very quick things. On Friday, the Public Health Department and school nurses did administer 114 boosters to all of the school personnel. They could get Pfizer or Moderna. On the 11th, this week, they're going to be doing vaccines for our kids ages 5 to 11. Currently, they have 1,080 available vaccine appointments for Thursday. Information went out today to families, so if you would like to sign your children up to get their first vaccine, please do. The clinic will be open, I believe, from 9 to 3. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Benny.
Question, have there been any cases at the high school? Since
Not that we know of.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so if it's okay, since we just took up a lot of time on that, I'm going to just very quickly go through the chair report, which is warrants 22-012, 22-013, and 22-014 have been approved and included in your packet, and payroll warrant S22009 is approved. Also in your packet, I did, just as a quick update, I did receive a number of media inquiries regarding kind of the off-ramping that we've had. I did speak with NPR.
Wow.
I am trying to be very careful. I know the early media pieces have really tried to focus on the division of our vote, and I'm really trying to push forward that this is what the school committee is doing and that we are a group together and moving forward. So anyway.
That's great,
Yeah.
I
We've
thought
had
you
some
did a
good
great
press.
job, I don't think the media always did a great job, but I thought your statement was clear.
Thank you.
And I thought the superintendent's statement was clear, too.
I think, we had great respectful debate over the course of 2 meetings and gave it a lot of thought, and we came out with, a trial that seems, knock on wood, to be going well.
I mean, to be fair, as a school committee, for the past year and a half, we have had some really harsh votes, and we have not always agreed. And I don't think we have ever seen ourselves not, end up in a situation where because somebody voted differently, we have any kind of animosity. I'm really proud of us. I think it's been the most stress you can possibly have in a year and a half. And we've been navigating it, yeah.
Me too. So that's all I have for tonight. We did do the liaison reports. Well, that's for the reports. That's all I have from the night. But that brings us into the transportation contract 1-year extension. Susan.
Thank you. So the contract for the bus transportation with Michael Connolly is a 3-year with 2 1-year extensions. We're in the first of the 1-year extension that will end with fiscal year 22. So the school committee has the option of taking that second 1-year extension. The rate for the current year is $402 for a 2 and 3 tier bus and $387 for 1 tier. For FY23, the option would bring it to $407 for a 2 and 3 tier, or $392 for 1 tier. So the increase is minimal, represents about $900 for a 3-tier bus.
Do we renew? Does it preclude us from changing the number of buses? If
No, we can always add or subtract buses at any time.
It's just locking the rate for another
Locks
year.
in the rate,
Thank
that's
you.
correct.
Can I ask a question as somebody who, I don't think last year we spoke about transportation contracts necessarily. What does a 3-tier bus mean versus 2-tier or 1-tier?
So we no longer have a 3-tier. What that means is it was running a middle school, high school run, then the Hopkins run, then the Marathon Elmwood. Now we're down to just a 2-tier. We do middle school, high school at one time, and then all the elementaries at the next time.
Okay.
So that's
So it's
considered a
just
2-tier.
when they- Okay,
Yep.
thank you, that helps.
A motion?
And do you
Oh,
have
yeah, sorry.
recommendations? Would you like to see us extend it?
I think for the cost, you know, the total contract increase is $27,900. It's pretty minimal.
I make a motion to approve this 1-year extension. Okay.
Motion by
Second.
Meg, second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Okay, so that passes. Thank you very much. Do we want to go into the credit card authorization?
Sure. Yep, so this is a request that's coming from Dr. Zaleski and from the 18 to 22 program, our Excel program. They currently have a committee made up of parents, students, educators in that program, Dr. Zaleski, and what they have begun the process of doing now is creating a business out of the White House. And it's very exciting. I think that they're in a place where they know what it is that they would like to sell, but they have some limits to their purchasing power because if they are to use POs to buy everything, there are many, many places that won't even take a PO. And those are the places that will also kind of jack those prices up. So there would be very little, if any, profit. So what they are asking for is to allow Mrs. Rothermick to start the process of obtaining a credit card exclusively for that program. It would literally be the only credit card that exists in this district. So it is unusual for Hopkinton, not unusual for all districts. But what they note is that the credit card would obviously have a cap and really, again, only to be used for that program and that program's business, no other aspect of the program. I think it's a very good idea for them to be able to get that business launched, and the business people who are part of the adult group, the adults on that subcommittee, they will 2-1 say that it's very difficult to run a business if you don't have that kind of purchasing power.
Okay. So is there any questions?
Yeah, is it's still using town funds, right? It's just a, yeah,
Right. It's
okay.
just a different way of
funding.
being able to purchase.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to hear the Director of Finance opinion. Does it
So,
make sense?
It's not an unusual program. Many districts have
Yeah.
this card. It's called a procurement card or a
P-card,
P
yeah.
card. So there's actually a program that is through ASBO, the Association of School Business Officials, which is a national program that has the vendor and everything all set for you. You just have to follow their requirements, and so it's unusual for Hopkinton, but not unusual for many districts.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
I make a motion for the Director of Finance to move forward with the process to obtain a credit card for the Excel program.
Second.
Motion by Meg, a second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. I am excited to see the Excel program moving forward with that. So the next thing we have here is the vendor negotiation with 78 Sports.
So quickly, we have a vendor invoice for 78 Sports in the amount of $57,653.05. It's for the installation of fencing around one of the fields on campus that we are looking for the school committee to authorize.
A
Motion to authorize as read by the Director of Finance.
motion by Joe.
Second.
Second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that also passes. I'm gonna, I don't wanna step on the toes of any of our policy working group, but
Oh,
would it be
please.
okay if we pushed off the policies, just because we are significantly over time? And we do have to, a couple of other things that we have to, I am assuming we need to do the capital plan.
We surely do. Yes.
That need did not go away, so that, if we push off those, that would bring us down to the capital plan.
Okay.
Is that everybody in agreement with that?
Sometimes if you turn your Bluetooth off and on again, the TV will pop up.
Oh, it's 9 p.m. But if we had switched the clocks back, our bodies feel like it's 10. Yeah. So I'm feeling a little punchy. Yeah. Well, if we did the policies, we could go way over time.
Were there any changes
Who
to the
knows how
capital plan from the last time we saw
capital
it?
report is? Hopefully it's not too bad.
Yes.
No.
Did the select board meet over there tonight? Oh, I think that might have been the
Oh, yeah.
different group. There were some select board, I saw at least one select board member, it was on the floor. I was thinking, I let Irfan get away.
I'm just looking at your screen because it
I
would
did
take
not
too
see
much effort for me to
I've been
scroll
having to
down.
share.
I can do the same. I'm just so tired. Oh, yes, we know this. We are familiar with this. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so we just need to approve.
Right. This is our second. Yep.
I'm really excited David's program.
Me too.
I know.
I apologize, trying to find the TV.
No, let's push it off again.
Okay, everyone ready?
Yeah.
We are ready.
Okay.
We're cheering
Excited.
for the wetland order of conditions over here.
Don't even.
So is this like another level of fine tuning since the last time you read it, or?
There have not been any changes, so what you saw, this will just be a quick review, so
Okay.
I'll try to
Great.
move through it as fast as possible. One of the recommendations is for the high school auditorium stage and lighting upgrade. We did have a vendor come through and review everything in terms of making recommendations. So for $325,000, what the recommendation is in the auditorium, controllable cameras for performances and meetings, the stage and studio, replace and upgrade all the main electric controls, stage curtain and riggings, repair the main curtains, travelers, batten and border curtains, stage lighting, conversion to LED lights and new wiring, and the HHS TV studio, new lighting for the studio. It is connected back to the auditorium, so the studio would have to be upgraded at the same time. Existing conditions, the projection screen is improperly mounted on lighting batten, lighting fixtures mounted above the screen on the same batten, pointing down and resting on the screen. Some lights are hanging too close to the curtains. The curtains are aged and torn, and we are unable to determine the last fireproofing treatment. The dimming system is unable to handle LED fixtures, and again, the HHS TV studio is connected to the same. Just some quick pictures of existing conditions. You can see the light is hanging on the same batten as many other things and pointing just straight down. The curtains are in terrible condition, and these are the control systems that are unable to be updated, and as Mr. Person said in the last meeting, we're unable to get parts for repairs. The consultant also laid out a new lighting design for the auditorium that would be recommended. This is a visual of some of the lights and the updated control system that would be put in place. Replace district-wide IDF switches. An intermediate distribution frame is a freestanding or wall mounting rack for managing and interconnecting the telecommunication cable between the end user device and a main distribution frame. This will replace half the IDF switches in the district and is part of a regular end-of-life replacement plan. And the cost of that project would be $75,000. Wetland order of conditions. This is for $60,000, is to increase the amount that was appropriated to complete the wetland restoration that was required from the original installation of the high school fields. In FY19, the full cost of the project of $100,000 was requested, but was cut to $40,000. This additional appropriation will get to the full cost of $100,000 required for this project. Air handling unit replacements. The air handling unit replacement of $475,000 will be for one each at the high school and the middle school. The high school unit controls the common area, the middle school unit controls the auditorium. And this is part of a regular end-of-life replacement plan.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
When we go into this town meeting, I have a concern that the appetite for high cost things is going to be pretty low. I'm a little worried that the high school auditorium stage and lighting upgrade is not going to be seen as high priority as the other two, which are replacements of actual products. And since there's so many bullets, I was wondering, can we break that up a little bit to show like a couple groupings of things and the costs of the different groupings? Because maybe even if there's a low appetite for, $325,000, we might be able to get part of that. If we get all of it, great. But I'd like to just put us in a position where maybe we can get part of it if there isn't an appetite for all of it.
There's difficulty in it because it all goes back to the brain, if you will, which is that control system.
Okay.
If you change the control system, the existing lights don't work. If you change the lights, it's not compatible with the control system. So unfortunately, it becomes kind of a rolling effect of everything kind of ties to the other. There are some things that we're doing this year that we're really seeing more as safety issues that we were able to pull out and do immediately. But a lot of this kind of ties is like a daisy chain. I'll see if there's anything that we can break out and make independent.
And I mean, if we can present it that way too, like this is a daisy chain of things. This thing has to be changed, but if this thing gets changed, then it just something to tie kind of the bullets together. And like I said, if you can break it out, great.
Right.
I would love to get as much of this as we can.
Right. Yep. Okay, so then moving on, alternative energy. We've talked before about the cost of utilities in the budget, $731,000 for electricity and $298,000 for gas. So the committee is carrying over $1 million in utility costs in the operating budget. So one of the ways to look at this and strategize around that cost is looking at solar and battery storage alternative energy. So we're looking at solar for the Hopkinton Middle School roof and the parking lot canopy, the high school roof and a bus lot canopy, Hopkins Elementary School roof and Marathon front parking lot canopy. So the first one, the middle school roof and battery storage, you can see the production would be 418,000 kilowatts, lifetime savings of 1.9 million, and lifetime revenue of 1.3 million. The middle school parking lot canopy would produce 414,000 kilowatts. You can see the year one operating and cash flow, and the lifetime savings 1.4 million and cash flow 1.4 million. The high school roof and battery storage 302,000 kilowatts. I'm sorry, I was remiss to mention the cost on the first two. The cost for this project is $1,046,000. The lifetime savings would be 1.5 million and the revenue of 1.2 million. The bus lot canopy, 414,000 kilowatts, cost of 1.25 million, 51. Operating savings of 1.4 million and cash flow of 1.4 million.
Can I, sorry, really
Go ahead.
quick, just for anybody listening, I thought it was very compelling what you said last time about the bus lot, in case somebody didn't hear what you were saying about the snow and the protection. Could you just repeat it?
Sure. So the added benefit to the parking lot for the bus, you'll see this canopy is pushed out to the edges, and that was purposeful to maintain the flow for the buses to be able to get in and out. But in addition, what it does is it provides cover for the buses, which is especially helpful. Of course, in the high sun times, it does keep the buses cooler, but then also in the winter, it provides that protection from the snow. When we get storms, the drivers have to arrive very early in the morning. They have to, by law, pull all the snow off the roof. Then they pull all the buses forward into the middle of the parking lot and have to pull out all the snow that now has fallen in between the buses. So it does have added benefits operationally to have that cover there as well.
Thank you very much.
So the Hopkins roof, 224 500 kilowatts at a cost of 440,000. And the Marathon, the front parking lot canopy, 352,000 at a cost of 1,062,000. So the goal of these projects is to install alternative energy sources to offset the operating budget and generate revenue to pay for the projects. Hoping to make this taxpayer neutral, reallocate the money with a focus on the classrooms, and create more sustainable operating budgets. So when we put all these together, from a capital purchase, the total project cost is 6.2 million and 87. The operating budget savings is 8,311,000, and the cash flow is 7,143,000. So there is a procurement alternative, which we have done with our solar projects. We have a power purchase agreement. Partially one piece on the Marathon is a PPA, and what we have on the middle school, high school is also that. What that is with that is we do not own the actual solar panels, and we just get the benefit. So the cost is zero, but the benefit that you get is lessened. So for a capital purchase of the projects that I just explained, again, the cost would be 6.2 million, the lifetime revenue of 7 million, and the operating budget savings would be 8 million. If we were to do all those projects using a power purchase agreement, the cost would be zero. We would not have any lifetime revenue. That goes to the owner of the project, and we would have a lessened lifetime budget savings. However, we do still have savings. So that is an alternative to an outright capital purchase.
Can I ask a question about that slide specifically?
Yep.
So in looking at the capital purchase side, it appears to me, and I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly, that the benefit to us is the lifetime revenue plus the lifetime
Yes.
budget savings.
Together.
Correct?
Correct.
So one other, just to, because I did have a question from somebody in the community. The capital purchase, my assumption would come out of some kind of borrowing that the town would make.
Correct.
The revenue that we're making, it sounds like, would pay or more than pay per year, whatever the debt payment would be.
Correct.
That's great.
That's the goal. And I've been
Perfect,
in
yep.
conversations with the treasurer, with the town. So before I presented this, we've been going back and forth and having these discussions, and he does agree.
Great, thank you.
So one other comment is when you first presented it, I wasn't sure how to read those two lines. And I think in line with Nancy's question too, would it be helpful to have a line that shows total benefit 15 million?
Sure.
You know, just makes it a little more clear.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
So I do have one question. We're talking about doing a district-wide study. We're talking about maybe consolidating schools at some point. And we're talking about Hopkins being part of that consideration. So if something like that happens and we put solar panels on Hopkins, how would that affect our debt, right? Like everything else, I know we've talked middle school, high school, everything else is stuff that we're sure we're going to be keeping and is going to be in use. But Hopkins, I was a little concerned about when I started thinking about it.
If you were to change Hopkins, if you will, you most likely would put an addition on, similar to what we did with the modulars, but, you know, it may be different. It may be stick-built, and it may be out the backside, probably going towards the fields. So your existing roof line would not change.
Good question.
Okay, thank you.
So in order, when you say lifetime benefit, what is the number of years you're using?
So this is a lifetime benefit of 25 years.
I mean, I think it is possible that aspects of our campuses could be impacted over, I mean, it's a long time.
But I was thinking like short term.
Well, no, but that's why I asked about like the parking lots, because I think as we look at traffic flow and usage, I was concerned last time about that, and also, you know, if we're looking at the land adjacent to Marathon, we're talking about a Marathon parking lot. I mean, I assume the Marathon lot would stay untouched, but, you know, we only have so much land to work with, and we definitely have things on the horizon, but you don't know what you don't know, I guess.
Exactly.
I mean, in terms of logistics of the capital budget, if we, I guess, do we need to vote which purchasing option? Is that something that you need from us, or is that something that you determine with the CFO?
No, if you were to say that you would rather move forward with the PPA, then it's not part of the capital plan.
Okay, so tonight we can decide which path.
Correct.
Okay. Second question is, if we decide, as presented, that we wanted to go ahead with the whole list, is it something that then becomes subject to one vote? Is it possible during the voting to take out, like, could town meeting, if it's one list, say, well, I'm happy with like the top three, but the other two let's hold off on? Like, is there an option, or do we need to list them each separately?
That might be a discussion with the CFO in terms of whether they want to have those each separate articles, and there may be strategy around borrowing that I wouldn't get involved in.
Okay. And last question. So, I know we don't decide how this goes forward in terms of, is it a exempt, or, Prop 2.
Right, yeah, that's,
But, even if we predict that the revenue would pay the debt on whatever we borrow, could it still be a candidate for something that requires an election vote as well as a town meeting vote? I mean, would it still be potentially a Prop 2.5? I don't really understand how the finances, I know how they're projected, but how does it actually work in terms of financing?
it would still be a Prop 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
regardless.
Because
Because you are asking the town to take on
the
debt.
debt.
Yeah.
Even though we're not asking the taxpayers to pay it.
That would be part of the presentation.
Okay.
No matter what, the town has to borrow the money.
Yes.
And so legally, to borrow the money, they need the votes.
Okay.
But,
Thank you.
but when you're talking about Prop 2.5, I just want to clarify this for people watching, we are not talking about an override.
No.
Yes, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Right,
These
yeah.
are debt exclusions
Debt
and
exclusion,
other things.
exclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that piece is not part of my jurisdiction.
Right.
That's the town. Okay. So putting everything together, the high school auditorium, stage and lighting upgrade, $325,000, the IDF switches at $75,000, wetland order of conditions at $60,000, the air handling units at $475,000, the solar and battery storage purchase at $6,287,000. So the total capital request would be $7,222,000. The revenue offset potential is the full $6,287,000, bringing down to the projected taxpayer cost of $935,000 for those requests. Again, another way of looking at it, the same list, but if you were to elect to go with a PPA, the cost would be zero, so the capital request would be still the $935,000.
One last question. With the solar and battery storage purchase, what is the loan date rate? Like how long is the loan for? Is it like a 10-year loan, 25-year loan?
So we would, and again, it's really the treasurer's jurisdiction, but the thought would be that it would be a 20-year loan.
Okay.
So you would amortize over the 20 years.
Okay, so the offset does make sense. That's what I was trying to figure out. We were
Right.
talking about a 25-year.
So we're projecting a
20-year loan.
25-year
Okay.
life, longer than obviously a loan period would be.
Okay.
And this list also has to go from our group through appropriations and through other hoops, so that I'm guessing it's possible that even if we voted to do a purchase, it could come back to us as not being a purchase. Is that?
Somewhere along the way, any one of those groups could
That's-
ask you to pull any
And we
one of
could-
these projects.
And we could then go to the purchase agreement instead, or would we have to wait until next year?
No, again, a power purchase agreement is not a capital decision.
All right. Other questions? Okay, so we are,
Sorry, just one more. Is there a maintenance component in terms of on the expense side of the budget to manage? Will there be additional custodial fees?
We have a preventive maintenance program now for the existing ones that we bought for Marathon, and it's very little money. So, it'd be a couple thousand for a preventive maintenance program. If we were to pass this, it was to get all the way through town meeting, probably be another year. So in '23, it would not have a budget impact.
But you're not anticipating the need for additional human, like headcount or FTEs of custodial
No,
staff?
we would have a vendor do the preventive maintenance.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
question, good question. So we are looking then for a motion on this plan. Anybody feels inclined to make a motion?
Do you have a recommendation on the purchase of the PPA, your preference, like what you think is best for us?
I would always advise a capital purchase, and the reason being, you're going to sign in on a PPA for a 20-year term. And we all know that electricity rates change, so you're signing in now on a 20-year term that you don't know what it'll be next year, 2 years from now. So if you purchase it, you're not playing that market anymore.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
there's also weirdness about paying someone using your roof for free to produce electricity.
And making
there's-
lots of credits.
Yeah, there's just weirdness there. Okay, so I move to approve the FY23 capital plan as stated by Ms. Rodemick.
Second.
Motion by Leah, a second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So thank you very much for the presentation again and the detail.
that moves forward. Again, we're gonna move, policy to a future meeting. Do people have agenda items they wanna add, or do you wanna email them to us?
Do you already have on your, in your plan to have an agenda item at the first possible time after this 3-week trial to, okay.
Yeah. I think that'll be an
Okay.
important piece
I don't want to have
to
to
look at.
email you to ask for that agenda item. Thanks.
But yes, I think that's important, and I think figuring out our direction forward.
Right.
Then let's move into items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that passes as well, and I would look then for a
So
motion
moved.
to adjourn. Motion by Meg, is there a
Second.
second? Second by Joe. All those in favor? Aye. It is unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:26. We are meeting again tomorrow night at 7 PM remotely for well, we have to do, yes. And then the November 18th, we have some budget presentations as well as December 2nd.
All right.
Thank you all for hanging in there.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.